Chapter 11. Peak.o.c.king. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 16 Days to Live. It was time to meet Beluga and Antonio again. Ben sat on a bench in Central Park as he waited for them to arrive. It was a beautiful afternoon with lots of people walking, exercising, or sitting on the grass. There were many women alone or in groups. Beluga came from the direction opposite to where Ben was sitting, so Ben didn't see him when he came close, showing surprise when he arrived. Beluga was just as surprised to see Ben, but for a different reason. Ben had become much thinner. Beluga almost didn't recognize him. Beluga looked down at his big belly and then at Ben's. However, his reaction was the opposite of the normal person. He felt bad for Ben. In Beluga's head, big was beautiful. If Beluga lost that weight, maybe people wouldn't call him Beluga anymore. Maybe they would call him Shrimp. He couldn't take that risk. Ben lost his natural advantage, but Beluga wouldn't rub salt in his wounds. Sup? Beluga greeted as he sat down next to Ben. Ben observed Beluga's unique style. He still wore his signature purple pimp hat and sunglasses, but exchanged the robe for a purple jogging suit with white stripes. Is he Barney the dinosaur? Why does he only wear purple? Ben wondered. Hey. I've been meaning to ask you. I've noticed your clothes are a bit unorthodox. What's with that? Ben asked. Beluga turned to Ben. With his mouth hanging open, he slid his fingers along the brim of his hat and tipped it. This righteous gear. Don't feed the troll, Ben reminded himself as he stayed silent. This is Peak.o.c.king, Beluga said. Peak.o.c.king. Yeah, you've heard of the bird Peak.o.c.k. With the beautiful feathers. Those birds attract mates with their fancy feathers. The ones with the flashiest feathers get the most females. In pickup, we have a similar concept. Flashy clothes can attract attention from females. Many people will look at you, which is good for your image. Females may even open you. At the very least, you'll have an extra conversation topic when they ask you about the clothes. Ben thought about it. That's interesting. Maybe I should try that. Then he saw Antonio approaching from down the street. He was Peak.o.c.king too. Antonio wore giant green feather shoulder pads that were bigger than his head. They extended out to his elbows from his blue polka dot jacket. This was Peak.o.c.king to a whole new literal level. Ben gulped. I better stick with classic styles. You can't go wrong with those. When Antonio arrived, Beluga looked at his outfit and nodded. People all around the park stared at them as the two showed looks of pride. This was the attention they were after. It didn't matter to them that most of those looks were of disgust. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Ben tried to keep a poker face watching all this. Antonio wasn't too surprised to see Ben's improved body because Ben had warned him ahead of time. After some appetizing small talk, it was time to get to the main course. Beluga spoke to Ben. All right. Last week was only a warm-up. Those lines you used. That was just some crazy nonsense. I told you to wipe out your fear of rejection. That's the first step. You need to be able to open a female in a calm manner without nervousness. Saying crazy things helps with that. Since you've already used such offensive lines, you should have an easier time using normal ones, right? Ben's eyes widened in understanding. I guess it makes sense that commenting on their tits wouldn't be the best opening line. Ben learned something new every day. Beluga continued. The biggest factor in opening isn't what you say, but how you say it, also known as tone and body language. You have to be calm, confident, and obey certain rules. Once you're good enough, you can use almost any opener as long as it isn't offensive. A simple, "How are you?" can work as well as anything fancy. Ben listened in rapt attention. We'll get to the specifics later. For now, let's start with a simple example. Antonio, go open a 2-dot set to show your cousin how it's done, Beluga stated. 2-dot set? Ben questioned. Set refers to a group. The number is how many people there are in it, Antonio answered. His eyes burned with anticipation. He looked around and spotted 2 girls sitting on a towel on the grass. Without hesitation, he approached them. Ben watched as Antonio opened these 2 complete strangers. He used some opener Ben couldn't hear, but it seemed to go very well. At first, the girls' faces showed surprise. Then after a few exchanges, they loosened up and even asked Antonio questions. A minute later, he was sitting down on their towel laughing with them. You see that? Beluga asked. Ben's jaw hung down. His cousin was always a nerd like him before. He didn't know his cousin had this in him. That was amazing. He walked up to 2 girls, total strangers, and now it's like he's part of their group. The girls were now patting Antonio's shoulder feathers, giggling about how soft they were. Things were going great. That's how you do it, watch and learn, Beluga said with a smile full of confidence in Antonio. Ben nodded. It seemed he could learn a lot from his cousin. Squawk, a loud bird call erupted through the park. Ben, along with everyone nearby, glanced in the direction of the noise. Ben saw Antonio flapping his arms like an eagle, laughing. Squawk, he cried as he made some kind of joke or impression. The 2 girls backed away with looks of terror. They picked up their things and ran away as fast as they could. Ben looked over to Beluga, whose confident smile was frozen on his face. Ben couldn't view his eyes, but he imagined they gave off an aura of wanting to die. After a long silence, Beluga said, he's still got a lot to work on after the opening part. Antonio sighed but shook it off and went back to Beluga and Ben. When he reached them, he showed a proud face to Ben and asked, You see that? Ben stared at him. I don't know what I saw. Chapter 12. What is attraction? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Beluga praised Antonio. That was pretty good. Things got a little weird at the end there, but people don't judge stories only by their endings, right? Nice job. Ben thought, the ending is important though. If it sucks, people won't read the story. Then he realized a bizarre truth. That didn't apply to most of the web novels he read. As long as they're over 100 chapters and didn't end on hiatus. Beluga looked at Ben. That's the power of peak.o.c. King. Did you see how those females were playing with Antonio's feathers? It was a conversation topic. The peak.o.c. King item also made him seem unique and interesting. Being attention-grabbing is important. Alright. I'll show you another example myself. Beluga got up. Scanning around like an eagle, he identified 3 cute girls on the grass at the bottom of the hill where he stood. He adjusted his hat until it was at the perfect angle. Then, with a smirk radiating confidence, he walked on the grass towards his target. Each step contained a supreme swagger. There was a rhythm to his movements, like a bass beat from a catchy funk song oozing flavor and flash. Each forward motion built his momentum until he became unstoppable. That's when Beluga's eyes popped out. He looked down. His legs were now behind him as his face approached the grass. He'd tripped over a rock. The funk song became death metal. Julia was having a wonderful afternoon. She hadn't seen her 2 girlfriends in months. They were catching up and having a wonderful picnic when she heard a scream and looked to her right. A giant purple bowling ball of doom was rolling towards them at horrifying speed. The 3 girls escaped like fleeing cattle. Strike. Beluga got up from the ground. He removed the bits of grass from his mouth and clothing as he looked around. Scattered sandwiches were strewn all over the beautiful picnic he had demolished. Shrugging, he picked up a sandwich and ate as he went back up the hill, resuming his swagger steps. The previous scene had stupefied Ben and Antonio. They stared with their jaws hanging down until Beluga made it back to their position. Beluga held his chin high. "You see that? That's how you get attention. The females even left me home. Made sandwiches to show their appreciation." Next, it was Ben's turn. This time Beluga gave him a few normal lines. Ben also felt these lines had more potential. Eager, he got to work. Right away, he noticed a difference. Even though the women still rejected him, they were much more polite about it. At least, his face was still dry and slap-free. What was growth? This was growth. Even the tiniest improvements are exciting when you start at the absolute bottom. A few times, the responses were even lukewarm. Not cold like a slap in the face. Not piping hot like coffee. Lukewarm. Ben felt there was room to continue conversing. The problem was he had no idea what to say. As a result, those interactions ended with him stuttering or giving a blank stare. Ben returned to Beluga. "What do I say after the opener?" Beluga stroked his chinstrap beard. "The early phase is all about building attraction. That should be your focus." "Attraction?" Ben asked. Beluga clarified. "You need to attract a female before anything else. That's the first major hurdle. Only then would she be interested enough in you to consider something romantic. If a female isn't attracted, you'd be wasting your time, because the best-case scenario would be friendship." At the word friendship, Beluga and Antonio showed frightened faces. It was the dreaded friend zone. "What types of things affect and increase attraction?" Ben asked. Beluga answered. "The obvious ones are the more universal things like appearance, social status, and charm. Then there are specific factors, which some females may prefer over others, such as common hobbies, intelligence, how well spoken you are, how manly you are, etc. The influence of the specific factors can vary depending on a female's type. The universal factors can also vary in a female's type, but not as much. For example, a male model will be attractive to the vast majority of females." Ben thought, isn't he describing my system's stats? Appearance is looks. I'm guessing charm is the same as charisma. Then there's knowledge, manliness, etc. Beluga spoke. Think of it like this. Those previous attributes I mentioned set the foundation for attraction. When a female sees you at first, she'll discover some of those things on sight, such as your appearance. Others she might only discover through speaking with you or others about you, such as your social status, intelligence, etc. When you add all the characteristics, it creates an attraction baseline. If your baseline is high enough, you will attract females right away. He continued. Why do men do things like go to the gym, get high-status jobs, become rich, and many other things? A big reason is to raise this attraction baseline with females. Even though making gains in these areas takes a long time, even us pickup artists recognize the value in developing them. Raising the baseline is important because it makes everything that follows easier. Of course, if attraction was fixed and only depended on those factors, then what would be the point of us pickup artists? Our specialization is the last part in attraction, and also the most important, seduction skills. This hooked Ben's attention. What are seduction skills? Beluga smirked. Seduction skills are ways to raise attraction in a short time. Even if your baseline was 0, with perfect seduction skills, you could skyrocket attraction to the peak. You could get any female you wanted. Ben gasped. He'd only heard of such things in legends. Right then, he received a system alert. User has unlocked favorability system. User has unlocked favorability sub. System. Attraction. Ben squeezed his fists in excitement. Chapter 13. Jokes and stat bumps. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ben unlocked another system function. He asked the system and it explained the attraction system would indicate the attraction level of a woman towards him when they spoke. Isn't this like an NPC favorability system in games? His eyes shined. This excited him for several reasons. First, this favorability system would be very helpful. How useful was it for a clueless nerd to know how a girl felt about him? The answer was obvious. Second, he now knew that by learning more about being a pickup artist, his system would unlock more abilities. After calming down, Ben went back to listening to Beluga, who explained attraction further. The reason seduction skills can raise attraction is that it isn't fixed. Attraction is a perception. It can change inside a female's mind. Thus, by saying and doing various things, a pickup artist can raise attraction. Ben swallowed. What kinds of things? Beluga smirked. To put it in obvious terms, you have to do things females find attractive. There are hundreds of different techniques. Let's start with the basic layer of building attraction through speech, which is communicating attractive qualities about yourself that aren't clear on sight. That may include accomplishments, interesting stories, and things that show your high value. So Ben, tell me. What are some attractive things you've done? Ben was deep in thought for a full minute, then, he had it. 15-game win streak in Rocket League. We'll skip that. The entire section, we're skipping it. I'll ask you again in the distant future. You'll have to work on it, but it's okay. Beluga assured him. That is pretty amazing though. At least the fellow nerd Antonio was impressed. Alright, how about this? Beluga said. Ben, do you know any good jokes? Ben's face became full of confidence as he nodded and smiled. As an internet otaku for so many years, how could he not know excellent jokes? He knew the best jokes. It was his time to shine. Ben saw a single girl sitting and reading a book nearby. He approached her. Excuse me, miss. Yes, she responded. Is that the new Harry Potter? Ben asked in a curious tone. This was one of the new openers Beluga gave Ben, to ask a basic question about an item of the girl such as a book, a phone, a strange piece of clothing, etc. It was a simple opener to break the ice and was strong in its flexibility, you could adjust it to many situations. Target's current attraction level. Indifferent, above her head, the system produced a small pop-up screen visible to Ben only. It displayed on its own without Ben having to request it. As she responded to Ben, he prepared his follow-up joke. Antonio and Beluga watched on in support and anticipation. When the woman started cursing Ben, the anticipation disappeared, but they still supported him. When the shoe flew at Ben's head and bounced off, their support also withered, sprouting shock in its place. Ben walked back to Antonio and Beluga with a new bump on his head. Antonio questioned Ben, what joke did you use? Your mama's so fat, stop. Beluga realized he should have been more specific about the jokes. Try ones that aren't insulting. Then Beluga gave Ben a joke to try on another woman. Speaking with the last girl, Ben had watched her attraction level change from indifferent to disinclined, and then to disgusted. The system explained to him the attraction levels from worst to best. Mortal enemy. Disgusted. Disinclined. Indifferent. Curious. Interested. Attracted. Fangirl. So far, Ben had started at indifferent, which he reasoned was because of his average 5 in looks. Armed with better material, he spotted another woman and tried again. He opened her in a similar way to the last one, but when it came time to tell the joke, he stuttered because he wasn't used to telling it, and it failed. Ben returned in disappointment when something happened that brightened his mood. Congratulations. You've completed the weekly challenge. It's a numbers game. Open 100 women, completion status. 100/100, distributing reward. Stat point, random, x1, assigning stat communication +1, congratulations. You've unlocked the achievement. Junior opener, common. Open 100 women, distributing reward. PUA points plus 100, Ben was ecstatic. Not only did he finish the weekly challenge, but there was even a hidden achievement for the same accomplishment, 2 for the price of 1. Even though he only had 450 points and needed 50 more to get a low-level mystery box, he was still excited. He browsed the next weekly challenge. Weekly challenge. Handful of digits. Acquire phone numbers from 3 women who are interested in you. Reward. Stat point, random, x1, completion status. 0/3, after reading the challenge, he took the description to mean the attraction levels of the 3 women had to be at least interested. He assumed it was to stop him from finding loopholes. As far as seeking loopholes, Ben didn't bother wasting time doing so. He still remembered when this shameless system told him no slam donkeys and no pay-pigging when he had only thought of some possibilities. Ben's communication stat went up from 3 to 4. Unlike looks, this wasn't a stat where he could notice the difference in a mirror. He was anxious to see if the higher stat would change the results of his approaches, so he searched for a new target right away. After selecting one, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. It was time to see what his new communication stat could do. Chapter 14. Teasing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When he spoke to the woman, Ben noticed a difference right away. The words flowed from his mouth like water, his voice sounded smoother, and even his body felt more comfortable. As Ben delivered the opener and the joke, the woman responded well. She giggled. Congratulations. You've unlocked the achievement. Curiosity killed the cat, common. Make 1 woman curious, distributing reward. PUA points plus 100, there was nothing better than points. Ben didn't even mind the system's vague insult in the achievement title. He had enough to buy a mystery box, but he'd save that for later. Now, he needed to focus on the present opportunity. If he could raise this girl's attraction level to interested, then he might get her phone number. Ben persisted in chatting with the girl for a few minutes, but the mood only turned awkward. Despite the higher communication stat, he was still too lacking in experience and conversation topics. After some time, she excused herself and walked away, leaving Ben standing there frustrated. He shook his head. It's fine. This is already a massive improvement. He returned to Antonio and Beluga. They also observed that Ben had done much better and encouraged him. Ben described to Beluga how well the joke went, but he needed more material to raise attraction. Beluga said, the best jokes are situation-specific. Not only will they be the most relevant, but they'll display your intelligence in adapting to the situation. Females will pick up on that and become more attracted. That I could give you a fish, but it's better to teach you how to fish. So rather than hand you a joke book, I recommend you try inventing teasing-style jokes on the spot to build attraction. Teasing? Ben questioned. He understood the word's general meaning, but not the specifics of doing it. Beluga answered, teasing is making a light-hearted joke targeting the female. You choose some item or attribute of hers. Clothing, an accessory, a tattoo, something about her body or hair, then you make a joke about that, poking fun at her in a subtle way. That I understand. I'll give it a try, Ben said. Despite his inexperience, he discovered the boost in communication improved his creative thinking ability. That made it easier to generate conversation ideas. He amped himself up to give it a go. Ben approached a woman stretching after a jog. Body part, he reminded himself. Hey beer belly. As Ben walked back, Beluga and Antonio shook their heads hard. Ben knew it was no good. He moved to a new girl to try again. Clothing item, he said to himself. What's up clown shoes? He dodged a water bottle. Okay, that didn't work either. That's alright. 3rd time's a charm. Ben found a new target. Let's try a different accessory. He adjusted his material. I like your raccoon hat. He hiked back with his new hickey. The red slap mark on his face. That was her hair. Who could tell? Why is nothing working? Ben screamed at the heavens. Congratulations. You've unlocked the achievement. Watch your back, common. Make one woman a mortal enemy, distributing reward. PUA points plus 100, I even got points for that. Ben glanced back at that woman he just spoke to. Her strange brown H.I.P. stir haircut framed her eyes, as they spat a venomous glare at him. Behind the malice, Ben only saw more malice, and the desire for devilry. He jogged back to Beluga and Antonio, glimpsing over his shoulder every so often to confirm he wasn't tracked. Upon Ben's return, Beluga gazed at him with newfound respect. He didn't know if this kid would ever make it as a pickup artist, but he was a damn prodigy at cursing and offending people. This was a talent. Beluga explained to Ben where he went wrong. You're doing too much. The point of teasing is to be playful and charming, not insulting. There's a spectrum between boring and abusive. Choose something the target won't be sensitive to. The teasing should be funny, which helps loosen things up. He continued, your body language is also important for easing the tension. Enter with a relaxed joking tone and a light smirk so they know you're playing around. Okay, let's try something a little different. Approach some females and think of a famous person they have a vague resemblance to. Open them by jokingly asking them if they're that person. Okay, I can do that, Ben replied. He spotted another woman gazing at a lake in the distance. As he got closer to her, he went over the plan. Famous person that I got it. Don't forget the light smirk. Ben was a quick learner. His body language and tone aligned in perfect harmony. He remembered to speak with a carefree, playful attitude. He did everything Beluga said. It was perfect. Are you Hitler? Ben rationalized it to Beluga. Her short hair looked like Hitler's though. He committed genocide. No homicidal maniacs for F***'s sake. Pick someone with no crimes against humanity. Beluga yelled. Ben reflected and brainstormed. What about oral genocide? Is Miley Cyrus out? Chapter 15. Otaku Religion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is harder than I thought. Ben sighed. All right that I can do this. Let's go again. He scanned the horizon, discovering an intriguing girl with bright pink hair in the distance. She was standing next to a flower garden, laughing at something on her phone. Ben thought, pink hair. That's too easy. I'll ask her if she's the stripper from that movie. No damn it. That's offensive. Something else. Ben pondered for a while but no one else sprang to mind. Then he thought of something. Wait, would that work? Beluga said famous person that I don't know if characters would qualify. His idea was strange. He wasn't sure if it would fly. In fact, he expected it to probably crash and burn. Would she even know who that is? After considering it for a few seconds, he sighed. Whatever, I'll just try it. I'm not getting any better ideas anyway. Ben went over to the girl. As he got closer, he noticed two things. First, on her pale skin, she had an almost star-shaped birthmark under her left eye. Rather than making her unattractive, it added a unique charm. Second, she was super sexy. Her long pink hair stretched down to her waist, curving around her large D-cup bra.s.ts, which popped out even more when contrasting with her narrow waist. A skin-tight black top displayed her smooth stomach, accented with a butterfly piercing at her belly. Ben gulped. This is a long shot, but I'll never know until I try. He walked up to the girl and launched the stupid line he was sure would bomb. Hey, are you Sakura from Naruto? He delivered the line with the proper playful tone but was still pessimistic. Ben predicted she would glance at him like he was crazy or say no and walk away. At best, she wouldn't understand who Sakura was and ask for clarification. The prognosis wasn't good, but this world had no shortage of medical miracles. PFFFTT, Ben's face froze. Did she just burst into laughter? Haha. I wish. The girl said. Target's current attraction level. Interested, congratulations. You've unlocked the achievement. Passing interest, common. Make one woman interested, distributing reward. PUA points plus 100, another 100 points. The achievement shocked Ben, but he tried to keep a straight face. It seemed this girl not only didn't walk away, but her attraction level jumped right to interested. Was she an anime fan? Ben realized, this must be what Ben meant by type. If this girl is an anime fan, then me using such an unusual opener about a subject she likes must have created this amazing result. It made sense that some openers could lead to leaping attraction levels. Not long ago, he cliff dived from indifferent to mortal enemy on a raccoon. Head. The girl interrupted Ben's thoughts. Do you like anime? Ben hesitated. It was an unwritten rule among otakus and superheroes that you never reveal your true identity, especially to a cute girl. No. I can't play this one by the book that I need to take a chance. That's right. He risked it all. The girl stared at him. After a long time, she smiled and extended her hand. I'm Katie, please talk me cha. Yes. Ben tossed the otaku Bible in the garbage and it worked. He wouldn't be bound by mortal rules anymore. Hail Satan. Ben shook her hand and offered his name. Now what? He was lucky that he didn't have to decide. After he admitted to liking anime, Katie began an endless rant. She talked about the recent animes she's watched, her favorite characters, and scenes. She didn't even give Ben a chance to speak. The dark side offered many benefits. Ben only nodded the entire time. After a while, when Katie was out of breath, Ben's instincts told him the moment had arrived and he took a stab with his devil-forked tongue. Katie, I have to go, but can we exchange numbers and talk later? Ben's tone was relaxed but his heart was thumping. She was silent for a few seconds, considering it. All right. Give me your number, Katie said. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I'll die in 16 days. Ben knew better than to give his number to a girl. He was thankful that Beluga already gave him the perfect line for this occasion. I don't pick up calls from unknown numbers, so put your contact in first. Ben took out his phone and put it in her hand to input her number. To Ben, the line sounded like something a drug dealer would say, but according to Beluga, women liked that. After he said it, Katie's eyes flashed. Then, she put her number in the phone without further hesitation. It worked. Ben was dancing in his mind. Morpheus Beluga was right. He began to see the matrix. There was one last step left. He still remembered what Beluga said. These females are sneaky. Sometimes they give fake numbers. Be sure to call it and see her phone ring before you leave. It's not weird. This is called double checking, okay? Even NASA does it. Even though something sounded off, Ben couldn't afford to care about it. He pressed call on her contact. When her phone lit up, Ben knew he succeeded. Congratulations. You've unlocked the achievement. If you throw enough **T at the wall, some is bound to stick, common. Acquire a phone number from one woman who is interested in you, distributing reward. PUA points plus 100, he gained another 100 points and now had 850. His weekly challenge also progressed. As for that brutal burn of an achievement name, Ben didn't care. The system was like a beauty with a bad temper, he would put up with her as long as she kept giving him benefits. Ben saw the chance to live. If he kept going at this rate, maybe he could really complete the life and death mission. No. He'd already given up his otaku religion. He'd do it no matter what. Chapter 16. What is charisma? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Getting the number fired him up, but Ben knew to quit when ahead. Beluga advised him after getting a number he should exit. It's always best to leave on a high note. So Ben said a quick goodbye and walked away. Beluga and Antonio smiled with pleasant surprise. They didn't expect Ben would get a phone number on their second day together. What's more, that girl was hot. Way to go, cuz. Antonio congratulated. Beluga nodded many times in appreciation. Ben narrated what happened with them. When they heard he admitted to being an otaku, their eyebrows elevated to their hairlines. Ben's unorthodox opener and the girl's response were like a nerd's wet dream. It was not typical. You could say Ben lucked out, but the always elusive luck is only caught by those who risk chasing it. It was approaching sunset in the park, so they called it a day, agreeing to meet again the next week. Ben was tired and eager to open a new mystery box, so he returned to his dorm. Walking to the subway, Ben's mind couldn't stop thinking about what his mystery box could contain. That so far he'd only gotten consumables, but there were probably many other types of items he hadn't seen yet. He wondered about it. I can imagine some real-world items. Could there even be skills? He licked his lips in anticipation. Ben sat on his small double bed as he stared at his system screen. His foot subconsciously tapped the floor in rhythm as he was in the middle of a tough decision. 850 points, the system mentioned it hides some store items until I have enough points. Should I save up to 1,000 first? No, I only have 16 days left. Last time I didn't get any points for a week. Who knows how long it'll take? I need to use any potential advantage now. He settled. Opening up the store screen, Ben used 500 points to buy a low-level mystery box. It materialized in his lap and he opened it. Ben knew by now to close his eyes, only opening them after a few seconds when the light receded. He saw a familiar item. Another stat growth multiplier. Ben wasn't sure how to feel. It was useful, but it was hard to say if he could make significant enough gains to change his fate in 2 weeks. Even if it was for looks again, he suspected he'd at most gain 1 point, since he'd already eaten the easy beginner gains the prior week when he lost his flab. He knew losing fat is much easier than gaining muscle. The only difference Ben noticed was that this card was a different color. Light blue. He touched it and a new pop-up emerged. Mid-level stat growth multiplier, consumable, rare, charisma, x1, charisma. That's pretty go. He froze like a deer in the headlights. Wait. He scrutinized the screen's information again word for word. Mid-level. Rare. Ben stood up and gasped. Oh my God. Would it do what he thought? He asked the system and verified it. Yes. 100x. This card would multiply his results by 100x. Ben did the math. That means over 7 days, I'll get almost 2 years' worth of results. Bingo. He danced and did karate moves around the room. Slam Ferric entered to uncover Ben in the middle of a Hadouken. His eyes widened. That's a nice Hadouken, bro. Ferric appreciated it. Thanks, man. His roommate even had great taste. This was Ben's day. These two roommates had seen little of each other. The prior weeks of university kept them both busy, Ferric with studying and Ben with not dying. Ben wanted to catch up, but it wasn't the time, so he made some small talk and excused himself to get some air. The eggshell-colored walls of the dorm hallway were cluttered with new flyers and informational bulletins, but Ben was too distracted to read them. He was still recovering from the shock of receiving that mid-level item. Rare was the highest quality item he could get from the low-level mystery box, so it was incredible that he lucked out and got it. He didn't know the odds, but they couldn't have been too high. Ben didn't know if the system was helping him or the heavens were on his side, but if he could use the stat growth multiplier well, it might give him a chance to make breakout gains. This is what he needed. His charisma was 0, so there was massive room for improvement. Any charisma-related activity he did would generate earth-shattering growth. Only why couldn't he think of one? Now that I think about it, what is charisma? Ben scratched his head. He paced in the hallway as he considered it, steps advancing in uncertain gait on the brown carpet. He lost track of the outer world as he delved into his ideas, but after some time, he still couldn't grasp it. It wasn't a simple stat like looks. Just how would you describe it? Sighing, Ben planned to ask his system, but he first wanted to know how society defined it. Snapping out of his previous trance, he walked to the elevator as he pulled out his phone and searched. One definition he found was a personal magic of leadership arousing special popular loyalty or enthusiasm for a public figure, such as a political leader. 1. Ben shook his head, I'm not a politician. Next. Another definition was: you say that someone has charisma when they can attract, influence, and inspire people by their personal qualities. 2. That confused Ben. Doesn't everyone who influences people use their personal qualities? Personal qualities are inherent, there's no avoiding the use of them, tch. I still don't get it. He looked for another one. That single, undescribable, intangible quality that a girl with big jugs has. Ben looked at the source. Author, Wet Coaster, on Urban Dictionary. Well, I can't argue against that, but it still doesn't help me. He sighed. Okay. Let's move on to the system's definition. Only after speaking with the system, did he understand it. Charisma was a multiplier on all his stats. It was similar to how attraction started at a baseline, then seduction skills could raise attraction from there. All his other stats were a baseline, and charisma was a soft skill expressed through communication, which magnified the effectiveness of his stats on attracting and influencing others. Communication could happen through his speech or body language. His appearance alone could even give off a sense of charisma when people looked at him, which multiplied the attraction of his looks. It was an amazing stat. With Ben's 0 charisma, he received no multiplier at all. Meanwhile, someone with marginal charisma could have all their other stats identical to Ben, but crush him in every social activity. That's why you have some media personalities with mediocre looks or communication skills who are still very popular. Even with a definition, Ben's main issue was still there. How could he improve charisma? Ding! He looked up from his phone to see the doors for the elevator open. Ding! The elevator doors closed, but Ben still stood outside, not having entered. A flyer posted on the elevator's side had mesmerized him. The flyer said, Motivational Speaking Seminar. Ben gasped. That's it, he shouted. Chapter 17. Stat gain is a hell of a drug. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Charisma is all about influencing people with communication. Ben also read that one common trait of charismatic people is excellent speaking skills, so what better way to improve charisma than studying motivational speaking? It should also develop his communication stat. It was perfect. Ben took down the information on the flyer and checked the website on his phone for details. Even though the seminar wasn't free, it was for students, so it was affordable. However, there was an issue that it would interfere with one of Ben's classes. The seminar would start tomorrow and last for 7 days, using several hours per day. At the scheduled time, Ben had a writing class. This was a problem. His eyebrows pinched as he considered how to resolve the conflict. After a short while, he realized it was pointless to worry about it. Time was running out. What was the use of class if he died in 2 weeks? Ben made a firm decision. He would stop going to all his classes. Rather than wasting his time there, he was better off opening women and attending the seminar. If still alive in 2 weeks, then he'll return to his studies. Would his parents or teachers protest? Let them complain to his corpse. If Ben's parents found out he was skipping classes to chase women, they would choke him to death. But they didn't have a dominatrix system sitting on their heads, threatening to kill them. BDNVL.M. He used his phone to buy a ticket for the event on the website. Is this it? Ben was gazing at a classroom entrance with people shuffling into it. It was the noisiest area in the pearl-colored hallway. Near the door was a wooden desk and a chair with a person sitting there, checking for tickets from everyone who entered. It's her. Ben recognized the person and approached to say hello. Benjamin San. It was Miyuki, Ben's R. A. It turned out she worked as a teaching assistant for the professor who ran this seminar. She must have posted the flyer in our dorm's floor, Ben realized. The two exchanged a few words and he walked inside, not wanting to disrupt her work. Tall, is what Ben thought when he saw the classroom. He realized it differed from the others in the university. He'd already attended enormous wide lecture halls, ones that could house hundreds of students. While this one wouldn't fit so many, it had towering multi-story ceilings, like it was a room with special acoustics, meant to intensify speeches and the judgments of those listening. The professor must have reserved this solemn space for this reason. The seats were arranged in a semi-circular formation, focused around a speaking area at the front. They filled up as people arrived one after the other. Some minutes later, everyone who bought tickets was present, and the professor closed the door. Miyuki was the last to enter and sat in the last empty seat. By coincidence, it was right next to Ben. Hello again, Benjamin. San, Miyuki greeted with a warm smile. He greeted her back with a cordial smile. Meanwhile, in his mind, he grinned like an idiot because of the fortuitous seat arrangement. Ben inhaled the light scent of jasmine emitted from her body. He didn't know if the smell was natural or perfume, and he didn't care. He just treated his snout. Life was good. On the other side of Miyuki, a man watched their interaction and frowned. This B*TCH greeted this kid before me. He had very short black hair, an aquiline nose, and was as slender as a snake. He was older than Ben, around the same age as Miyuki, with darting eyes that displayed a wily temperament. Miyuki turned to the man, greeting him with a flat voice, hello again, Zachary. San. At that, the man's frown disappeared. Hello, Miyuki, he responded with a shrill voice, leaning forward to get closer to her. He'd been working on convincing Miyuki to date him for the past year. Zachary was also an RA, a fellow teaching assistant, and was here to help the professor. He thought having so much in common would be conducive to a relationship. Yet, Miyuki always told him she didn't date colleagues. He took that to be bullsh*t. Instead of speaking with him, Miyuki turned to Ben. Benjamin. San, how did you discover this seminar? Benjamin replied that he found the flyer by the elevator, to which Miyuki laughed and admitted she posted it. As the two continued to chat, Zachary's face became uglier and uglier. Who is this little sh*t? When everyone settled in, the professor went to the front and spoke. His words were eloquent and attention-grabbing. Ben understood why he was teaching this subject. Ben traced the palm-sized stat growth multiplier card in his jacket pocket. He'd waited until now to use it so that he got full value of the 7 days. When no one was watching, he took it out. He'd verified a while ago that others couldn't see his system items, including his screens. Still, they would see his motions when he used them, so he tried to be careful. Not wanting to waste more time, Ben activated it with a thought. Whoosh, his dopamine receptors fired up like a blazing forest. It was like a drug. Similar to when he used the stat growth multiplier for looks, an intense drive struck him to develop his charisma. I need to be influential. Be motivational. Charismatic. He was developing the mindset of a junkie. The system was a drug dealer in disguise. Ben imagined this was the urge artists and politicians felt when they started their careers. As the professor lectured, Ben paid attention to every word. He imagined each syllable as an energy ball containing a fraction of a stat point floating into his head. Yes. Come to daddy. Feed me. Don't stop talking. Don't stop. His bloodshot eyes ogled the professor like he was a Victoria's Secret model. The professor gulped and loosened his shirt collar. His spine felt a chill like he was being watched by a perverted beast. As a professional, he brushed it off and explained what they would do in the seminar. First, he'd teach about all the factors involved in motivational speaking. Then they'd participate in various activities. At the end of the week, everyone would give a motivational speech and receive constructive feedback. At the moment, they started an introductory activity. The professor said, "Everyone, the first thing we'll do is allow each of you to introduce yourselves with a few sentences. You may consider this your first activity." As the professor's assistant, Zachary chose who would speak. He went around the room, pointing to people one at a time by seating order. Ben sat in the back, so he was one of the last to go. He'd always avoided public speaking because the thought of people judging him made him uneasy. He even made excuses and called in sick when there were projects in his school that required it. As a result, he hadn't done it for many years. This time, however, he didn't feel the need to run. He'd been opening girls for several weeks now. This was only speaking in front of a few strangers. How hard could it be? When Ben's turn arrived, Zachary sneered, but pointed to Ben and told him to stand. Ben already knew what he would say and got up. Moments after he left the chair, the confident smile on his face froze. He felt like he'd been ejected into the absolute zero of space. A terrible wave of fear flooded his body, like a premonition of imminent disaster. Thump thump, his heart threatened to burst out of his chest. His mouth became dry. Breath short. His eyes popped out, bouncing around the room seeking the cause. What's going on? He panicked. Chapter 18. A bet to win the girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This was the moment Ben learned he had a phobia of public speaking and the physical consequences of it. He'd read about this last week in his Psychology 101 class. It's a common fear. In fact, it's the most common fear, affecting 73% of the population. In the statistics of the most common phobias, the fear of public speaking is even ahead of death. People are more afraid of public speaking than death. If you were to give 73% of people two options, speak in public or die, they would choose to die. At least that's what the statistics say. Ben was a man of science. He was also a part of the 73%. The worst part was he didn't know it until now. It seemed talking to an unknown woman wasn't the same as speaking in front of a group of strangers. Helpless in front of this classroom of judgment, sweat formed on his forehead as he withstood the heat of dozens of eyes beaming at him. Ben had been silent for 10 seconds and students were starting to whisper. He knew he had to say something. Anything. M.my endpoint name is B.B.B.B. Ben. Zachary noticed Miyuki's worried expression. Returning his gaze to Ben, he narrowed his eyes and formed a mocking grin. Okay, thank you. Next. Zachary cut him off. The interruption hadn't upset Ben but instead provided relief. He was too nervous. Releasing a deep exhale, he walked over to Zachary to get a name tag for later group activities. Then he returned to his seat and put the tag on his chest. Everyone had introduced themselves, so the professor returned to the front. Ben gripped the wooden desk's edges and closed his eyes for several moments, taking deep breaths to calm his still shaken nerves. When he opened them, he discovered people snickering under their breath. Others asked them what was funny and they pointed to Ben. After a minute, half the class had at least giggled at him. Do I have something on my face? Ben rubbed his cheeks. Benjamin.san. Miyuki's appeared sorrowful as she pointed at his chest. Ben glanced down to see his name tag. BBB Benjamin. He looked at Zachary, who wore an amused expression while writing some notes. The professor was busy drawing on a whiteboard and hadn't noticed this development. Ben frowned. He didn't understand why this guy would target him. Miyuki reached over to remove the name tag from Ben's chest, taking a pen and crossing out the extra B's. Zachary's eyes knitted his brows at this. Rather than be upset at Miyuki, he scowled at Ben. That's when Ben understood. So that's how it is, jealous over a girl. He snorted. It was annoying, but he didn't have time for this now. Ben ignored Zachary's provocative stare and returned to listening to the lecture. The first session of the seminar ended and most of the people had left. Ben was outside the classroom helping Miyuki move the desk and chair inside as a thank you for her earlier kindness. Benjamin.San, do you know what speech you will give at the end of the week? Miyuki asked. He shook his head. He hadn't thought about it yet. A sneer came from the classroom's entrance. Zachary sauntered out with a C.O.C.KY smirk. Speech. Can he even give a speech? If it's anything like today, it would take 3 hours to through it, haha. Ben and Miyuki frowned at this random insult. Zachary.San, you are being rude, Miyuki rebuked. I'm merely offering this undergrad some advice. Not everyone can speak in front of a group. Some people lack the necessary courage. He glared at Ben when he saw how close he stood to Miyuki. Ben had been an eyesore for Zachary since the start of the class. Who does Ben think he is talking to Miyuki in his presence? She was Zachary's target and his property until he finished with her. It would be best if he scared Ben off today, then Miyuki would only have him to speak with in class. Although Miyuki worked for the same professor, they worked during separate time slots, so there weren't many opportunities to be together like this. How could he give that precious time up to some snot-nosed brat? Was it petty? Sure, but this was the power a teaching assistant held over students. Too bad. Ben watched Zachary bluff and blu.s.ter. His intentions were written all over his face. Does he think he'll bully me out of the seminar with this? I've dealt with much worse. In high school, that one guy edited my face into a bestiality video. Everyone called me Ben the Goat *Cur for 2 years. You think you'll shake me? He showed pride in living through the ordeal. Being bullied was like surviving a war. Ben's eyes glowed as he dived into memories of air sirens and bomb shelters. Then that guy released a remastered edition, and I became Ben the Goat. This is nothing. Get skills, noob. A 2.war vet. Ben smirked. Zachary, right. How about we make a bet? Zachary crossed his arms. He didn't know where Ben was going with this. Ben continued. From what I've heard, you teaching assistants will also give a speech at the end of the week as an example to the students. Isn't that right? So what? Zachary asked. So here's the bet. During the last class, whichever one of us gives a worse speech will never bother Miyuki again. Zachary clenched his jaw. This little **T. Miyuki stood there blinking. How did she become involved? When she saw Zachary grimacing and Ben glancing at her with a reassuring smile, she understood. Benjamin.San is trying to help me. She realized Ben noticed Zachary pestering her. Ben was trying to stop it. Even though public speaking was impossible for him and would be very embarrassing. Miyuki gazed at Ben and her heart grew warm. Zachary spoke. Not that you stand a chance of winning, but what you're saying is ridiculous. She and I work together. It wouldn't be possible. Besides, are you even qualified to bother her? Do I need to compete with a lowly freshman like you to talk to her? You can't even put a sentence together. What a joke. Look kid, you've pissed me off. Either get lost from the seminar or I'm going to make your life in class a living hell. Miyuki now understood why Zachary made fun of Ben earlier. She also realized she was the only one who could do something in this situation. With or without the wager, Zachary was going to give Ben a hard time. She knew Zachary. He was capable of many dirty tricks. When they first sat down, Ben told her how important this seminar was to him. It's also her fault he was here. She put the flyer up. She couldn't let him suffer or drop out because of her. No, I'll go on a date. Miyuki's face grew red as she said the words. Ben and Zachary became silent, staring at her, unsure of what she said. What? Zachary asked. I'll go on a date with the winner of the competition, but there is one condition. Zachary.san may not bother Benjamin.san during the seminar. Miyuki tried to be a kind person, and she appreciated when someone went out of his way to be kind to her. New York City was full of people, but it was even more full of bitter coldness. She knew how rare it was to meet someone like Ben that would expose himself to humiliation to help her. Even though Ben was sure to lose and she would have to go with Zachary, it was only one date. It was the least she could do to let him take this seminar in peace. Miyuki, you don't have to do this. Ben said. Yes, do this. Ben thought. No, it's okay. Miyuki gave Ben a gentle smile. Zachary wore a weasel-like grin. We've got a bet. That's perfect. Miyuki, you can ask the professor to judge the best speech. You should believe he'll give a fair assessment, right? Miyuki nodded. Zachary had complete confidence in his victory. Although he wasn't an amazing speaker, he'd been a teaching assistant for the professor for a year. He gained a lot of experience with public speaking. Meanwhile, Ben couldn't even pronounce his name without stuttering. His date was a sure thing. What a great deal this turned out to be. Now that Ben was no longer a threat, Zachary changed to prioritizing his professional image. He put on his teacher's face like nothing ever happened. Benjamin, we'll see who's the better speaker at the end of the week. Good luck. Ben returned a frosty smile. The only thing you'll be seeing is stars when I embarrass you in front of your precious boss and students. Chapter 19. Charismatic Evolution. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. 8 Days to Live. Ben had to admit that when the countdown hit single digits, he felt like his heart stopped. He panicked. But what could he do? He was already doing everything he could. Ben sat on his bed and thought about recent events. This past week, he spent every waking moment working on his charisma and pick-up skills. He skipped all his classes. He went to the seminar every day. When he wasn't at the seminar, he read everything he could about charisma in the library and online. He even found ongoing university courses related to motivational speaking, and snuck into them. He searched for techniques to reduce public speaking anxiety and practiced them. When university closed, he hit the streets and did approaches, and even practiced motivational speaking then too. How? He approached large groups of women instead of individual ones. That felt more like public speaking in front of a large group, which helped him gain experience and reduce his nervousness. Ben's effort was not in vain. His first gain was that he completed his weekly challenge yesterday. After many approaches, he became better and better. His studies into charisma and motivational speaking showed genuine dividends in pick-up successes. In the end, he got 2 more phone numbers. Congratulations. You've completed the weekly challenge. Handful of digits. Acquire phone numbers from 3 women who are interested in you, reward. Stat point, random, x1, completion status. 3/3, distributing reward. Stat point, random, x1, assigning stat charisma +1, the system rolled the stat point into charisma. Ben didn't love that because he was already working on charisma under a 100x boost of the mid-level stat growth multiplier. Still, he wouldn't complain about a free stat point. There wasn't any achievement this time, but that was fine. This was his new weekly challenge. Weekly challenge. A frog's kiss. Kiss one new woman who is attracted to you, reward. Stat point, random, x1, completion status. 0 to 1, Ben wasn't sure how he felt about it. He hadn't kissed a girl since he hit puberty. But this was a necessary stepping stone. If he couldn't even kiss a girl, how could he seduce one within 8 days? Ben knew he needed to step up. It's a good thing that with his recent gains, he was optimistic about achieving better pickup results. The weekly challenge was only an appetizer. The main course was his stats. Looks. 5. Average, his looks hadn't changed. Even though Ben continued going to the gym, it would take a long time to see gains now. Charisma. 7. High charisma. Entry-level standard for related professions, this was Ben's biggest gain. His charisma shot all the way up from 0 to 7. A 100x bonus was no joke. That's 2 years' worth of results. During the past week, Ben took no time off. The stat growth multiplier made him concentrated and motivated to work on his charisma. He spared no effort, and this was the outcome. Every morning, Ben woke up with enthusiasm for new stat gains. There was only one issue. Over the last few days, he learned more about the stat system. Watching his charisma skyrocket, he understood one unfortunate fact: as stats increased, raising them further became exponentially more difficult. The stat system wasn't linear but curved. Ben perceived this when his charisma reached 5 after 3 days, then took another 3 whole days to reach 6. That was almost 1 year of results to raise it by 1 point. Raising each level was harder than all the previous ones combined. The only reason it was 7 now was because of the bonus stat from the weekly challenge. Ben felt if he used another mid-level stat growth multiplier on charisma, he might not even be able to raise it by 1 point. The system wouldn't make it easy to become a Superman. Still, Ben had a stupid grin. From 0 to 7. That was a life-changing transformation. Even though growth would be difficult later, how could he complain? He was a human waste 3 weeks ago. This was an evolution. Social status. 2. Get your life together, Ben's face fell. The system never let him smile for too long. Seduction skills. 1. Still more proficient in insults than anything else, so are you. After opening so many women, Ben's seduction skills gained the first point at last. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Knowledge. 4. Entry-level student, manliness. 3. Barebones qualifications as a breeding slave. What kind of society does this system come from? Communication. 5. Average speaker, his communication had also gone up by 1 from all the practicing. The stat growth multiplier didn't cover communication, so a 1-point gain in a week was already a significant result. Personal talent. 2. You're becoming top-heavy on other stats. Still an uncultured swine, did you have to end on an insult? I'm trying to stay positive. I have a big speech today. Ben took a deep breath. He knew it was pointless to ask for politeness from this damn thing. Today was a big day. It was the final class of the public speaking seminar. This was the day everyone would give their speech and Ben would face off against Zachary. As Ben looked at his 7 charisma and 5 communication, his face morphed into an evil grin. Last week, everyone gave him the nickname Stuttering Stanley. Today, they'd change it to Face-slapping Frank. Chapter 20. The crucial moment. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The professor was at the front of the classroom giving his last lecture to all the students. It had been an enjoyable and productive week for everyone. That was also the case for Ben, since Zachary didn't give him any problems, not even any name tag insults. Zachary must have feared Miyuki refusing to follow through with the date had he done so. The professor smiled with satisfaction. To various degrees, most of the students had improved their motivational speaking ability. Observing growth in students was the thing he enjoyed the most about his job. Now, he would see how much they've grown. He wrapped up and it was time for the end of seminar speeches. Each student either composed or chose a famous short speech and would recite it in front of the class. Afterward, there would be a short period where everyone provided feedback. The first ones up were Miyuki and Zachary. Everyone expected them to be the best since they had the most experience. By allowing them to act first, the professor hoped their speeches could serve as goals for the students to aspire to. Miyuki gave a cute speech espousing the beauties of Japanese gardens. This light topic showed how motivational speaking was a general skill that someone could apply to any area of communication. As long as you wanted to get a point across, motivational speaking could help you do it. Zachary went up next. He gave a determined speech about the need for higher civilian oversight for national security. It was full of anti-terrorism ravings. The topic wasn't to everyone's appetite, but even Ben had to admit it was a powerful speech that attracted each person's attention. SC.U.Bag Steve over there has a way with words. This must be how those poison punch cult leaders get their start. The professor complimented the speech in front of the class. He thought that Zachary was his best teaching assistant at applying the material. Even though Zachary's level wasn't quite at a professional standard, it was above that of a student. Afterward, the students gave their speeches. Some of them created their own, and others used famous speeches from public figures. Ben was the last in line. Zachary had arranged this on purpose. He knew the other students would be nervous and focused on their own speeches. So Zachary made it so they would finish and relax before Ben went up, allowing them to enjoy him make a mockery of himself. Ben's turn would soon be up. Miyuki looked over at him and chewed on her lip in worry. She never expected him to win. She only wanted Zachary to leave him alone for the week, which he did so far. You could say she reached her goal. So there was no point in Ben giving a speech since this seminar didn't give credits or grades anyway. Benjamin.San, she said. You don't have to speak. It's fine. Eddie Ben saw her concern and felt warmth inside. This girl sure was the thoughtful type. Still, how could he not go up? Of course he would. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'll be looking forward to our date. At that confident response, Miyuki C.O.C. kept her head in confusion. She didn't see how it was possible for Ben to give a better speech than Zachary. Zachary was the best speaker here, even better than her. It was obvious that Ben only began public speaking a week ago. He was so nervous then. He couldn't even say his name. At best, he'd be able to finish a speech today without anxiety destroying him. She rationalized that Ben must have been trying to ease her worries. Benjamin.San is the stubborn type, Miyuki thought. Even though he knew it would be hopeless, Ben still ran into the danger, like a samurai charging into a hail of bullets. Miyuki's evaluation of Ben rose a level. She became curious about him. Ben didn't fail to notice Miyuki's change. Well, the system made it hard to overlook it. Target's current attraction level. Curious, the last student before Ben finished her speech. Soon, it would be Ben's turn. Zachary told the professor about this contest and he was reluctant to agree at first. He found it unprofessional for a teaching assistant to compete against a student, but Zachary convinced him. Zachary said Ben issued the challenge to create a difficult goal to motivate himself to work hard, so Zachary was doing his duty to help a student. That was how Zachary used motivational speaking to deceive his own teacher. He even felt the professor should have been proud. Miyuki also verified that Ben issued the challenge and asked the professor to judge. Since it was a self-imposed challenge by Ben to motivate himself, the professor couldn't deny it. Of course, he didn't know Miyuki would go on a date with the winner. Otherwise, he wouldn't agree to become a pimp. The professor wasn't the only one who knew about the contest. Zachary approached several students and convinced them to spread the rumor of the bet to everyone in class. Since Ben had the balls to challenge him, Zachary wanted to make sure Ben was humiliated to the max. Step Ben walked to the front of the classroom. It was time to show the results of his efforts. When Miyuki saw no notes in his hands, only a bottle of water, her eyebrows wrinkled. It wasn't necessary to memorize the material. That was much more difficult. That's why no one had done so. Not even her or Zachary. Yet, it appeared this was Ben's plan. Miyuki bit her nails in worry. The professor's eyes flashed, but he said nothing. Zachary beamed a huge grin. This idiot was already going to suffer, but he's even asking for death. Wonderful. Ben didn't miss Zachary's scorn. He put on an icy smile himself. You just wait. You're about to get brutalated, then, I'm going to use your pain as coal in my furnace of ambition. Everyone gave Ben strange glances. He was rubbing his hands together like an evil scientist cooking up a nefarious plot. In any case, the room became silent. Ben worked hard for this moment. It won't go like last time. I'm ready. He licked his lips in preparation to speak and looked around at everyone. Then he felt the gazes of each person on his body like a piercing needle. Thump it appeared again. Crippling anxiety.